Hi, I'm Jackie Morrissey with the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, and I'm super excited to continue this discussion on Right Connections, an integrated approach to teaching 3-8 writing with the EL education curriculum. This is a three-part series, and for parts 1 and 2, we discuss the first two goals on the screen in front of you. We discuss the key components of skilled writing, which were identified by Joan Sedita in her book, The Writing Rope. In session 2, we identified writing structures across the curriculum so that we could see the integrated approach to teaching reading and writing with the EL education curriculum. And then in this particular segment, we're going to be preparing to deliver effective writing instruction. So let's go ahead and dive in. Again, you see a quote on the screen in front of you, and I would like for you to just read and internalize this as I am giving voice to it. The quote says, when teachers ask students to analyze text they are reading, students start to read like a writer. When students read text for this purpose, they are focusing on how the author made choices so they can better understand how to make similar choices in their own writing. This is a quote that came out of The Writing Rope by Joan Sedita, and it's one that I think bears quite a bit of merit for the discussion that we're going to have today around the value of teaching students how to read like writers. This is going to help them to become better writers themselves. So let's talk about the planning process as we began to plan to lead writing instruction with our students here in the School District of Philadelphia. As teachers are teaching students and students are learning how to become skilled writers, models and checklists and rubrics are three of those resources that are going to be extremely important to this process. It's very important to ensure that our teaching and our learning is adequately aligned to those high stakes end of grade assessments that students are going to have to show mastery on at the end of the school year. For these reasons, prior to engaging in on-demand writing tasks or assessments, students actually unpack models with their teachers and their peers so that they can understand and see qualities of high quality writing. And so once they learn to identify those things, then they are able to adequately apply them in their own writing. So in order to help prepare students for that, we provide students with checklists and models where they can receive feedback from their teacher as well as their peers so that they can further hone their skills in writing. For the teachers, there are also rubrics and checklists that are included in the model to help us as we are evaluating our students' writing to make sure that we are seeing the things that we need to see so that we can adequately prepare the students to, again, deliver quality writing pieces. And what is really nice is that these writing rubrics that we are utilizing in the curriculum are very similar to the writing rubrics that, again, students and teachers will engage with on those end of grade assessments, such as the PSSA, very similar in nature and writing style, format, and task. All of those things are adequately aligned per grade level standards. Something that I would like to highly suggest that we do, and the curriculum does a really good job of this, is suggesting that we test drive writing tasks before we actually assign them to our students. So it's not just important to understand the correlation and alignment with the high stakes writing tasks, but as we are engaging with the writing with our students, it's important for us to make sure that we ourselves know what we are assigning to our students. So as we test drive our assignments, it's important to ask 4 questions. Here's one that we need to think about. To what extent is the task clear, doable within the frame, and also with connected to the big ideas of the module? So we're asking ourselves as we are engaging in the task ourselves, is this really clear? Is this prompt clear for our students? And if not, what do I need to do to make it clear? Does the task require me to use evidence from the research and the reading? And if so, how am I teaching my students to look back and really be able to cite evidence from the text? What content knowledge do I need to successfully complete the task? So in order for students to be able to complete the writing task in a successful manner, what is it that they need to know in order to be able to fill in all of those holes and all of those gaps and pieces for the writing task that's being assigned? And then last but certainly not least, what writing skills do I need to successfully complete this task? This is a question that's really going to go back to those skills that we talked about before, those critical thinking skills, the syntax, the transcription, all of those things that we identified to make sure that our students are successful in the writing. And you might be able to think of some other questions that you might want to be able to answer whenever you are test driving an assessment, but these are just four that the curriculum actually highlights for us to make sure that we do when we are practicing those assessments ourselves. So, in order to prepare for this discussion, I wanted to make sure that I test drove a couple of writing tasks, and I'd like to talk with you about those. So, in grade two, module two, our students are engaging in a study on fossils and looking at how the fossils help to tell the story of the Earth. So students are learning how to retell stories. They're also answering who, what, when, where, and how questions. And they're also learning how to describe an overall structure of a story. To support their learning, teachers are guiding students in a close reading activity of an anchor text. So the text that you see on the screen in front of you, Stone Girl, Bone Girl, is used during lessons 2 through 7 in Unit 2. During lesson 4, students are completing a graphic organizer called a BME graphic organizer, which really helps students to learn how to cite details from the beginning, the middle, and the end of a story. It also helps students to learn how to retell a story in a very logical and cohesive format. In lessons 8 through 9, guess what happens? Students are asked to complete an on-demand writing assignment where they are required to answer two selected response questions, but then they are supposed to do some writing, which is similar to what they did in lesson 4. They are going to have to retell the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story, The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. So within this assessment, the teacher is reading The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs to the students, and the students are capturing those details and completing the writing task. So then I asked myself these questions. To what extent is a task clear, doable within the time frame, and connected to the big ideas of the module? This task is absolutely clear, and it's absolutely doable, and it's absolutely connected. One of the things that makes this such a nice writing task is that for lessons 2 through 7, that's like 5 lessons. We're engaging our students in a close read of a text, Stone Girl, Bone Girl, about Mary Ann Anning and her dog. And whenever the students are completing their mid-unit assessment in lessons 8 through 9, they are doing so with a nonfiction piece that is correlated with this text as well. So it's very, very connected, very clear. Again, they're doing the beginning, middle, and end, and they're going to have a similar graphic organizer. Does this task require me to use evidence from the research reading? You betcha. Anytime we're going to retell a story, we're required to provide specific details from the text. What content knowledge do I need to successfully complete this task? Well, students are going to need to know how to sequence. They're going to need to know how to identify key details about the character, the setting, and the plot. Again, they understand because we've read these two pieces who Mary Ann Anning is. They also understand the dog Troy, and they're understanding what it means to be a paleontologist because we have been working with this for several lessons by now. What writing skills do I need to successfully complete this task? All of those skills that we identified in session 1, critical thinking, we're going to need syntax because students are going to need to have to complete this incomplete sentences, text structure, writer's craft, and also transcription. All of those are going to be necessary skills in order for students to be able to complete this task successfully. Now let's look at an example from middle school. So if we were to go to 7th grade, you probably recall, those of you who work with the older students, that our 7th graders began Module 1 with the module Lost Children of the Sudan. The anchor text for this study is the one that you see on the screen in front of you, A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Parks, which is an amazing story. And while students are reading this, they are also completing a graphic organizer. So they're completing a graphic organizer in Unit 2 because they're also reading a correlated nonfiction piece called Lost Girls of the Sudan. This is happening in Lesson 8. During the Unit 2 end of unit assessment, students are required to write a compare and contrast essay where guess what? They're comparing and contrasting the differences and the similarities between A Long Walk to Water and The Lost Girls of Sudan. So if we are going to apply those questions to this writing task, we ask ourselves, to what extent is the task clear and doable within the time frame and connected to the big ideas of the module? This writing task is extremely clear, again, because we have this graphic organizer that goes along with it. It also connects to the big idea where we're helping students to understand things like scarcity, the need for water, the need for supplies, all of those prevailing themes that are in the story, and also looking at character development. So students are able to do this because it is clear and connected to the things that we've been studying and learning throughout the module. Does the task require me to use evidence from the research and the reading? You bet you. When we are comparing and contrasting, we're asking students to look at the two pieces side by side and also to provide specific details for their writing. What content knowledge do I need to successfully complete this task? Students are going to need to be able to cite text evidence. They need to make inferences and draw conclusions. So when I was doing this writing task, some of the things that I leaned on were this graphic organizer. So I knew that the Kakuma refugee camp was mentioned in both pieces. So I wrote about that in my writing. However, I talked about the different experiences that the girls had and the boys had. I also talked about the opportunities that were prevalent or that existed in A Long Walk to Water. The boys were given an opportunity to come to America to better their lives and their education. The girls were not. They were held back. I also talked about the need for water and how the girls were responsible for doing domestic duties. They were responsible for gathering the water and just doing that every single day. So your students are going to be able to call out details such as those, but again, they're going to have to be able to draw conclusions and make inferences from the material that was already read. What writing skills do I need to successfully complete this task? Again, the students are going to have to be able to think critically. They're going to have to be able to apply those syntax structures and skills in order to make sure that their writing flows in a logical, cohesive format. It makes sense. It's grammatically aligned and correct. There's good, strong text structure, and they're going to lean into their writer's craft as well. No two writers should produce the same writing. We're going to give them a format, but their uniqueness is going to come out definitely as they're writing. As you begin to plan the writing, there's some things that we want to think about for this planning process. We need to remember that we need to read the lesson narrative in its entirety. We're going to want to pay close attention to those focus standards as well as the before the lesson, the down the road pieces, what we can do for lighter levels of support, heavier levels of support. We're going to need to be able to lean into all of those different areas to adequately prepare. Again, we're going to have to look back, just as I did for lessons prior, to see where those graphic organizers are going to come in handy, what types of skills are going to be necessary for students to be able to show mastery on these writing tasks. We're going to want to test drive these writing assignments as much as we possibly can, because when we look at these tasks through the lens of a student, we begin to see the different materials that the students are going to have in place. And we can also start thinking about the unique needs of our different students that are in our class to make sure that those needs are adequately provided for. So we're setting all of our students up for success. And last but certainly not least, we go to our slide deck and our materials that are associated with the lesson plan. We want to review the slide deck. We want to review all of the correlated materials to make sure, again, that everything is in alignment and to make sure that all of our students are set up for success. We began with a quote. We're going to close out with a quote. And this quote is by the late, great Nelson Mandela. And it says, "Without language, one cannot talk to people and understand them. One cannot share their hopes and aspirations, grasp their history, appreciate their poetry, or savor their songs." Not only are we teaching our students how to become better writers, but we are helping our students to become better, efficient communicators so that they are able and very well prepared to compete in a global society. Thank you all so much for joining me for this Right Connection series. Again, my name is Jackie Morrissey. I work with the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. And if you have any further questions or comments or concerns about writing and the EL education curriculum, please feel free to email our office at ela@philasd.org.